So today is a very special day here at the Soul and Stereo Sessions. I've been waiting for it forever. Today is the day where I get to talk about my favorite artist of all time. And no, it's not that guy. And no, it's not this guy. Even though both are kings in their own right. No, today we are talking about the Queen. We are talking about my favorite, not the best, not my go-to. We are talking about, hold on, let me get into the spirit of things real quick.
Hey, cuz. What you doing, cuz? What you wearing, cuz? Cuz. I don't know, the streets rock with that, cuz.
Me, I'm Supa Dupa Fly. That's right, players. Yes, we are here and we are celebrating all things Missy, Misdemeanor Elliott, my favorite, my girl, my hometown hero. And today we're ranking her albums from bottom to top. If I don't pop. Whew. What up, y'all? Thank you for joining me for another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions here on YouTube. And yes, it is all about Missy Elliott today, the producer, the writer, the rapper, the icon, the lady who wore the giant trash bag and took over all of our hearts. Today, we're looking at her albums, in my opinion, not just because of the way she really reshaped music, and she happened to be from my hometown, and her creativity is boundless. She just seems like the sweetest person. Don't you just love a story from someone who deserves it? That's how Missy is to me. And I am joined by my boy Kyle from YouKnowIGotSoul. Now, Missy's tour, the Out of This World tour, is going on right now as I record this. I haven't been to the tour yet, but Kyle has. So I wanted Kyle to come through, talk a little Missy with us, and talk about that tour. So Kyle, what up, player? What you got going on?
Ed, what's going on? It's always fun to talk music with you, my man. We've been doing this for many, many years. Of course, with the Soulback podcast. But when you hit me up for this, I was like, I'm all the way in. Not only because I was the first person to go to this Missy Elliott tour, because it stopped in Vancouver first. But, man, you know how it is. Timbaland, Missy, the whole Basement crew, the Super Friends crew. If you want to talk about it, you know I'm in, because I'm a huge fan of that. I was able to go to that in Vancouver, but even when they announced the tour, you had Missy Elliott, you had Timbaland, who to me is like, if he's not my favorite producer, he's definitely in like my top 3. I love his catalog from his early beginnings to even what he's doing today. You have Sierra, who, for me, Sierra's an important piece of my music journey, because that was like 8th grade for me when Sierra came out, and like at that time she was huge, and just to follow her journey and watch her progression as an artist. And then Busta Rhymes, another legend in this game, and just one of the most skilled and almost to a degree underappreciated artists of our era. To have all 4 of them on tour, right off the bat you knew it was going to be epic. You knew that you were going to hear the hits, but you'd also see some crazy visuals, and you'd hear some crazy sounds, and I was really excited to see all this come into play. And for me, it was even cooler because Vancouver was the first date of the tour. So, a lot of times when concerts come to your city, you're already checking the internets to look at the set list, to see what songs they might be performing, but I had to go in with a blank canvas. I had nothing to reference off of because, again, it was the first date of the tour. So, we went to this tour, and the first thing I remembered was when I walked in, they gave us this little bracelet thing. And what was cool about this is throughout Missy's set, this bracelet would light up in the color that her stage was. So if her stage was red and the lights were red, this would also flash red, and it would be in sync with everyone else's bracelet, and it just created like this whole different thing. I'd never actually seen it before. I heard they do it at Coldplay's concerts, but this was the first one I've been a part of that had these cool bracelets, and it's kind of a cool souvenir to keep as well after we were done. But the concert itself was super cool. You had Timbaland, who went on first and just went through his range of hits from the Aaliyah catalog, the Genuine catalog, the Justin Timberlake catalog, to even those songs that you may have forgotten about. Like he did Love to Love You with Magoo. He did the Drop record with Fat Man Scoop and Magoo. Even touched on the 50 Cent AO Technology record, the Jay-Z records. It was this whole thing, and it was just like, man, you kind of forget how many hits Timbaland really has. And then Sierra came on, and like I said, I'm a Sierra fan, so I was really excited to see her on stage. You knew she was going to kill it with the dance moves, but it's another one where you don't realize how many big hits she's had throughout the years, outside of even the first two albums, which were huge, but even the later albums, there was always that one hit on it that people loved, and she showed out, she danced, it was choreography, it was live singing, she had a band, and the visuals were fun too, and the outfits were crazy. So really happy to see Sierra, and the crazy thing is she just gave birth a couple of months back, so to see her back on stage and do what she did was pretty cool stuff. And then Busta, man, like, if anyone's ever seen Busta Rhymes in concert, you will know that his energy on stage is nothing I've ever seen. Like, there's only a couple of artists that I can think of that have that type of energy on stage. Busta's one of them. Ja Rule's another one. Ludacris is another one. But man, Busta, even if you didn't know all the songs he was performing, and I knew most of them, him and his partner on stage, they did their thing. So shout outs to Busta. And of course, he did Look at Me Now live, the Chris Brown record, where he spazzes out, and it was really one that was incredible to see. And then of course Missy, I mean, what can you say about Missy Elliott? You knew she was gonna do some unorthodox stuff, because that's how her career has always been, right? Just like Busta, her music videos have always been out of the regular, but it's always been a spectacle. Her music's always been one that has got the party started, and it was no different. She showcased her entire catalog from the first album all the way to some of those recent releases she's had, and in a live setting, it's incredible. It was a party like no other. I know it's kind of promoted, at least in Vancouver, it was promoted as like a nostalgia tour where you take a trip back into the 2000s, but for me it was like, it was nostalgia, but it also kind of made me realize or remember that a lot of Missy's hits and Timbaland's production, to a degree, it was so futuristic, it was so ahead of its time, and when you played in an arena setting, you really get to see, like, man, this stuff still sounds fresh to this date. And Missy is dancing. There's a whole dance team around her, and it was something remarkable to see. And man, it's one of those concerts, you go to it, and we were there from 7, which is when Timbaland got on stage, and we didn't get out until, I want to say 11:15, 11:20. So you're really at an arena for 4 hours consecutively, and everyone was on time, everyone performed at their set time, and you don't get that at concerts. Missy was right on the dot at 9:15 with the crazy visuals. And then the best part about it, and this might be a spoiler alert, but before Missy closed the show, she brought Timbaland back on stage to do Up Jumps the Boogie. She brought Busta back on stage to do Touch It, and Missy did her part, her verse on that remix. And then she brought Sierra back on stage to do Lose Control. And then all 4 of them got on stage, started dancing, started interacting with the crowd, and all of them were on stage thanking the crowd. And it was just one of those things where it was almost like it allowed them to get the appreciation that they deserve as legends. And I think it was a pretty cool moment, right? You know, you're coming off of COVID, tickets are expensive, and you kind of have to pick and choose which concerts you want to go to. But for me, as someone that grew up with these artists, but I'm still a fan of these artists, so I don't necessarily look at them as just nostalgic acts. I go to this show wanting to see them still move and perform, because you know how it is, right? You have artists that are a little older now that you kind of acknowledge that they're past their physical peak, and maybe vocally they aren't what they used to be. So you go to these concerts because you just want to feel the nostalgia and just reminisce on the old times, and you get that with this concert. But you also get 4 performers that are still serious about this and still want to put on a great show. So Sierra, Busta, Timbaland, and Missy, they all, I can say, really did a great thing with this tour.
Thank you, player. And for those who don't know, again, Kyle is from YouKnowIGotSoul.com, the #1 site for R&B on the web. I've been working with those brothers for so long. They are truly like family. So shout them out and make sure you check them out. And also shout out soulandstereo.com. If you want some good trusted R&B, those are the 2 sites you go. Don't worry about them other folks. We got you. But today is all about Missy, and we got a lot of Missy going on here, player. Full formed and birthed. We about to birth this thing.
All right, Ed, and lastly, I just gotta ask, what are you wearing?
You can't tell, player. I'm Supa Dupa Fly. Actually, I'm really, really hot. Hey, that's a Missy song too. Let me get out of this and let's get started. Missy's albums from bottom to top. All right, coming in at number 6 is the Cookbook. Of all of Missy's albums, this is the only album that I feel like just is okay. And that includes her EP that she dropped in 2018 or so, which I didn't include on this list, but I thought was very solid. This album doesn't really feel like a Missy album, and that's not a bad thing per se. She wisely, like all artists do, she wanted to try some different sounds. Not too many songs with Timbaland this time around. She's kind of working with Scott Storch and a few others. And everything's fine, but there's not the standout creativity that we know of. I know Pass That Dutch did well. I like Click Clack a lot. I think that song is great. I think Meltdown is a great song. But besides a few good songs here or there, there isn't a lot of meat here that really kind of grabs you. It's not surprising that it's Missy's last album. You could tell she probably was like ready to kind of explore other avenues, do something new, just sit down for a minute. So it's kind of a reflection of that. So while it's not a terrible album, it's certainly not nearly the heights of creativity and expanding the genre that we've known from her. An okay album, but pretty forgettable overall. Coming in at number 5 is This Is Not a Test. In my opinion, the forgotten Missy album, the one that no one ever really talks about. It's not a bad album, but I think the reason why is it lacks the one signature hit that the other albums don't have. There's no Pass That Dutch, there's no Supa Dupa Fly, there's no Gossip Folks, there's no Get Your Freak On. Every album seems to have like that one track that you could go to. And for this one, it's not really the one. Like, I'm really, really hot. I really like that song, but it's not a song that people really remember all that often. So it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But as a project on its own, it's pretty solid. Again, sort of like the Cookbook, it doesn't have the leaps and bounds pushing the genre forward as strongly as it does, as some of its predecessor does. This is kind of on the back end of Missy's output for the time. But in an album as of itself, it's pretty good. If it released today, it'd probably be a top 5 album in 2024, no doubt. Probably not number 1, but pretty high on the list. Lots of good stuff here to enjoy, lots of album cuts that are forgotten, but it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. Still, it's a very good album. Coming in at number 4 is Miss E, So Addictive. And pretty much from here on out, depending on who you are and your level of Missy fandom, any of these albums could be number 1. I've seen all 4 of these next albums as ranked as her best album on different lists. And this one is of course celebrated because get your freak on. This one is an absolute it kind of broke ground again. Missy was just like bam, bam, bam. Every album just seemed to break new barriers. And in the early 2000s, she did it once again with this release. And it's kind of funny because it's one of the ones that like grabbed a couple of Grammys and got a lot of the mainstream appeal, because whereas we always loved Missy for what she did, it seemed like it wasn't until this one that she really gained the mainstream acclaim that she deserved. Not surprising, mainstream always late to the party. Forget them. But we know how good she is. Personally, this one isn't that high on the list for me, and I mean, you can tell by the score. I absolutely think this is a great album. It just doesn't stand up to the album cuts. Some of the album cuts on this one are a little shaky, but the albums on the higher up on this list, I feel like are a little stronger. Another good release, not perfect, but I can understand why this is some folks' favorite Missy joint. Coming in at number 3 is the sophomore effort, The Real World. Missy was really worried about that sophomore jinx, but she was able to knock it out with a great release. This is number 3 on my list, but for Kyle, this is number 1. So Kyle, why do you like this album so much?
I know a lot of people are going to say that Supa Dupa Fly is a classic, and I'll be honest, I actually like more songs off of Supa Dupa Fly than The Real World, but I feel like the records I love on The Real World, that love is like, there's nothing like it, because you gotta understand that album, from a production standpoint, where Timbaland was headed, where Missy was headed, it was a little more dark, and I just love how they did that. Missy was a lot more aggressive on those records, and I think that's to me why I love it so much. Of course, you have She's a B Word. I don't know if I can say the actual word on here. I think it's a PG rated show, but that record to me, and how aggressive Missy comes off on that record, I love that one. Smooth Chick is another one. It's like the sister track to She's a B Word, but another great record. And then on the R&B tip, right, it was still dark, it was still kind of moody, but it was still dope with records like Hot Boys and records like All in My Grill. Those type of records that still had that dark feeling to it, but Missy just brought it to life with her vocals. Shout out to Nicole, Ray, and Little Mo as well. But I feel like it's the album cuts that really stand out to me. The Aaliyah record, of course, but honestly, the Beyonce record or Destiny's Child record, Crazy Feelings, it's one of those joints that when you first listen to it, you don't really think much of it, because you're just like, all right, this is cool. But when you listen to it from top to bottom, all the way through, you really start to appreciate the genius of that record, because Beyonce is singing in a way that at that time we hadn't really heard, because it was like really chill, and then those harmonies were crazy for Missy. And then of course you have the Juvenile record, You Can't Resist, where Missy just goes insane. That flow, to me, I always felt like that was one of those songs that really showcased Missy as an actual MC. And that whole album, to me, that album to me holds a great place in my heart, just how different it sounded than any other Timbaland record at that time, as Timbaland was progressing in his career. So I gotta say, man, The Real World, my favorite Missy album.
Coming in at number 2 is Supa Dupa Fly, the debut, the album that changed everything. In my opinion, is one of my favorite albums of all time. It shows you how unbiased I am because I don't have this one at number one. Yes, I have one album better than this, even though this is my favorite Missy project. It's hard to talk about now, but you really had to be there in 1997 to experience this album. This is the album that had the gigantic garbage bag suit. This is the album where Missy was sitting on a hill like Lauren. This is the album where she was dancing in the rain or dressed as Mega Man. She was doing things that hip hop had not seen. It was almost a throwback from like the Parliament the funk days, where you had these incredible artists just wearing this crazy garb and intergalactic themes. Hip hop, remember, in the late 90s was all about street. It was all about the hustle. It was all about street cred. She was bringing fun, creativity back to the game. And even though she was no Rakim with the bars, she'll be the first to tell you, it was the creativity that she used. It was the energy and the catchiness that she put into every bar that made all these songs so alluring. And shout out to Timbaland for the production. There's a reason why the song Supa Dupa Fly the Rain has been literally sent to space as of this recording, because it sounds like nothing else before or after. This song is over 20 years old, going on 30 years, and there's still nothing that sounds like it. This album was so ahead of its time and the definition of a timeless record, because it does not sound like it belongs in any time period. Absolute classic. That said, it's not a perfect album. It has some songs up there that are absolutely ridiculous. That Izzy Izzy Y'all song, I Love You Missy, but you just went in the studio and was just like for that song. I ain't with it. But the overall album, the impact, everything else. This album is a perfect example. While I say an album does not have to be 5 stars to be a classic album. A classic album defines a genre, it defines an artist's career, and it's an album that people still point to decades later. This is that album. It's not perfect, but it's an absolute hip-hop classic. And the #1 Missy Elliott album is Under Construction from 2002. Now, I've talked about this album before on this channel, so it might not surprise some of you, but some of you watching this for the first time are probably like, why is this #1 and not Supa Dupa Fly? Supa Dupa Fly is way more well known. True. But when we talk about absolute quality, this is Missy at her best from forward to back, the most quality of Missy's albums. I would call Supa Dupa Fly the most creative album, the one that has like defined Missy who she is. I feel like her sophomore album was the one sonically that took things to another level, because it was so dark and so different and brought something new to the table. You could say that her third album, So Addictive, was the one that broke through as far as Grammy appeal and mainstream appeal. So that one was the one. But if we're talking about the albums that's the absolute best from front to back as far as quality, consistency, and track layout, this is the one. And that's why it gets the top spot. Of course, it's got the hits. It's got the hits. Plenty of hits. But the album cuts are almost just as remembered. There are album cuts on this track that people think are singles, because they were just that ever present. We never got videos for them, but they're great. To me, Missy was at her peak. I'm not sure where this one stands in her personal discography of ones that she loves. I know she loves The Real World. I know she felt a lot of pressure and felt like that was the album where she kind of overcame the pressure and she succeeded. But to me, this is the one where she as an artist found herself and from front to back gave us her best work to date. In my opinion, from the #1 Missy Elliott fan, this is her best album. Who, player, give Missy credit for wearing that suit. I wore it for like 5 seconds and I was about to die. Anyway, thank y'all for joining us for yet another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions. Thanks to my boy Kyle for coming through. Kyle, we gotta do it again, player. We gotta do it again.
Ed, thanks for having me once again. I hope you get a chance to go to this tour, by the way, because this is, if I know I'm a huge Missy fan, but I know just as I'm a Missy fan and a Timbaland fan, you're equally as big, if not bigger. And I hope you get a chance to check that out, and make sure you leave with one of these bracelets, because I mean, it's a pretty cool souvenir to have. So, man, anytime you want me back on this to talk music, I mean, we got to get that Soulback podcast running again, because it's been a while. But anytime you want me back on this to talk music, because I am going to a couple of other tours, so hit me up. But I hope you enjoyed the tour, and for everyone else that's out there, hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll be back with the Soulback podcast soon.
And yes, the Soulback podcast, if you haven't checked that out, go to any of your podcast platforms. Go check out the episodes of those. It's a Soul and Stereo and You Know I Got Soul collaboration. We were doing podcasting about music long before your faves were. We got a huge archive of hundreds of episodes in there. Go catch up and see what we were doing. We were getting in trouble all the time in the early 2020s and late 2010s. Good stuff. And for those who are just joining this channel for the first time, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share this video with those who will enjoy it, Missy fans, and those who just need to be put on to good music. This edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions is a wrap. You gotta excuse me, I got a spaceship to catch. I gotta see this concert. I'll let y'all know how it is. You know it's a banger. I ain't bringing that suit though. Whew, that was like a hot pocket. Play on, players.